Chev-Dev, along with
talk about it amongst America,
Pastor Archie.
but we also want to talk about it amongst ourselves because we are the model.
And we discuss topics and how they get to a certain tipping point.
So if we do well,
KCPZ, Praise 95.3.
then things tip toward the godly way. If we don't do well, things tip towards a satanic way.
And so our objective is to look at where we're at and really discuss some issues on how we can move things.
You tuned into another episode of The Tipping Point. I'm Chev-Dev with Pastor Archie. How's it going, Pastor?
Going really good today. This is a nice brisk day outside, and it's nice to be out on the porch, read a little news, and get ready for our time together.
That's what's up. We have more brisk days coming up. I'm excited about that. I love fall. If we could stay fall most of the year, I'd be satisfied. It's just when the snow and the rain and the sleet and stuff come in, that puts a damper on everything I'm trying to do.
Well, I have a number of allergies that tend to disagree with the transition weather. So in the spring, when it feels the best outside, and in the fall, when it feels the best outside, inside, I have all kind of sinus activity happening. So, so it's all right, but I don't know if I want to do it all year round.
I got that. So what we got this morning?
Well, I thought it would be pretty good to talk about, when we talk about all the damage that's taking place in society because we are not functional, then I need to, or I think we as the church need to think about what does salt and light look like when we invade the space. Like if you give me a bland meal and you give me some good seasoning, the question is after I get through seasoning, does the meal still taste bland?
Gotcha.
Well, in this case, the bland has to do with a lot of elements, and one of those elements I think is a key covenantal issue that's been kind of toyed around in many different ways, and that is the family.
Yeah.
The family starts with a covenant that is in Genesis that talks about marriage, and the marriage covenant was a reflection of part of that made in my own image. When I say that is, we have the Trinity of God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, unioned in one. I mean, they're covenantally connected, and God is, in essence, is put together so that no one can put him asunder. And so what he did was he emulated that process by developing not only a covenantal relationship with him, but a covenantal relationship between two people about how they would reflect their relationship with him. So,
I got you. Well, I will tell you this. Growing up, I was gifted and talented. Math was my favorite subject. But I have never in my life been so stumped and without an answer than the equation and the variables that are within marriage.
Okay, and I understand that. I think you're not alone in that, and I think that our challenge is often where we're getting our information from, number one, and the volume of information that we're getting with reference to our ability to apply it. So, like good water can come out of a fire hydrant. But if you have a straw and you sit down and you try to take it in, it's going to drown you. And so that's what happens in marriages a lot of times is people think, I don't want a drinking fountain. I want a water fountain. So I'm going to get a whole lot of information. Well, the idea of a drinking fountain is you drink enough that you can apply. So therefore, when you drink it, you swallow. If you get so much water that you can't swallow anymore, then what happens is you're drowning in the good thing, and you perceive it as bad. The same thing happens if you try to drink out of a water fountain. I mean, so I'm going to a seminar, and I'm going to read a bunch of books, and I'm asking a bunch of people, and we got a lot of information. Well, what's happening is with the information superhighway, which we used to call the internet when it was first coming in, and we didn't have a term for it. And when we got that, and we got seminars, we got TV, we got all that kind of stuff. So what we're doing is we're trying to listen to all of this and find nuggets when they come out. And if you get a nugget when it comes out, you usually can't get the context from which it came. So therefore, now you got the nugget, you don't have the context, and so you apply it from the context of another nugget. And so I drank from the fountain, I drank from the water fountain, I drank from the lake, I drank from the stream, I drank from bottled water, and I drank from the faucet. And so now I got nuggets from each one of those out of its context in which it was given, and then I began to apply that in my marriage, and I wonder,
Yeah,
why it don't work. Shoestrings are great, but you got to have one to fit your shoe.
definitely.
And so you're not alone in the struggle. I think we just got to make sure that what we're doing and what we're finding, and in the process, we are reflecting the original purpose, rather than, just getting nuggets from a lot of different spaces to try to pull off what the author had intended when he put it together. So, thoughts, questions?
On the subject of marriage, many thoughts, many questions, don't know where to start. But I will say that I love a good challenge. You know what I'm saying? So, marriage is challenging. It's fun. You know what I'm saying? It's definitely worth it. Yeah, it's just a lot of times I thought I can put 2 + 2 and get 4. It's not always going to equal 4, and that's where I'm me personally.
So you're looking for this evidence of success.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about where we are in the country, and some of these statistics, because they come from the Census Bureau, and the Census Bureau is done every so many years, and you have the most accurate information that we can get. As
People
of now.
from the Census Bureau.
People from the Census Bureau, right. And so, so here's what we have. First of all, these are marital facts, but let me start with, first of all, let me start with the definition of divorce. Okay. Divorce in the Bible is not an independent issue.
Okay.
So God doesn't talk about divorce. He talks about things that have happened to marriage.
Okay.
And it's different because the context. Like people say, what does it mean to get divorced, and how do I have a right to get divorced? Every time you ask Christ about divorce, he'll say, no, let me explain marriage. And he keeps relating back to the Old Testament before Moses gave a legal right for divorce. So what he says is there wasn't a holy right for divorce that was never offered. And so when they asked him the question, he says, well, Moses gave you this because you couldn't do the right thing. But he said, but before, this is kind of the way it was. I think that's in Matthew 19. So when we talk about divorce, we can't think about divorce as this independent thing that God speaks about. Divorce is the result of not serving. Just like, when we talk about sacrifice, we got to talk about sacrifice in relationship to sin. Like Jesus is our sacrifice, only in relationship to sin. And so therefore, when you talk about his sacrifice, now he's our Lord in relationship to living. So if you talk about sacrifice, then the sacrifice had one thing in mind.
Yeah.
That was to satisfy God because of our impurity. Where our impurity was not an intentional suggestion from God. It was a result of our disobedience. So whenever we talk about sacrifice, we got to connect it to that in order to get a full understanding of God's intent. Because he didn't talk about, so he didn't just come out and say, well, let's talk about sacrifices and make that a thing. No, it didn't become a thing until sin became a thing. Okay, so divorce in the same way. When marriage was done wrong, then divorce came into the picture. So whenever you ask God about it, or whenever you talk about it biblically, he always refers back to the original element. The essence that he wanted was, I wanted you to be pure enough to have a solid and holy relationship with me. And when you weren't, then we had to invent something to get you back. It was this process of redemption. Divorce was invented because the element, the covenant, the intent of marriage was failing. Okay, so we got it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So now let's talk about how we've used this failure in our society recently. And I'll just kind of run down some statistics for you real quickly. First of all, according to the Census report, Census Bureau, marriages divorce at an average of 50%. If you take a long period of time, 50%. 50% of the people get married get divorced. The way it breaks down is people who get married in their first marriage, 41% of the people in their first marriage get divorced. And then you have the second marriage, people who got married again after that, and the average remarrying time is 3 years. So they get divorced. Within 3 years, they usually get married again. And that second marriage, 60% of them get divorced. So that means, and then you have the other, when they get married again within 3 years, then you have 73% of them get divorced. Okay?
For the second time.
From the third time, yeah.
Okay.
So, so you got first, second, and third marriages, which 3 marriages is not just a Hollywood thing now. It's kind of a bigger issue, and a lot of people tend to think that that is a decent way of managing this covenant.
Yeah.
The opt-out option. The number of divorces that take place in America has become big business. Is about 100 divorces per hour.
That is ridiculous. So a lot of people have to be getting married per hour then.
Well, a lot of people get married. Actually, the average age in which people get their first divorce, well, let me just go through the ages of people getting divorced. Under 20 years old, 27.6% of women and 11.7% of men. That means that the women are marrying guys who are older than them, and then they're getting a divorce under the age of 20.
Getting a divorce under the age of 20.
Right, right. From 20 to 24, 36% of women and 38% of men. Okay, so now it's caught up. So the older men are now divorcing some of the younger women that they married, and so that kind of makes men getting more divorced between that age, between 20 and 24 than women. Between 25 and 29, 16% of women and 22% of men. And so, what ends up happening is, of course, you still got that change in the ages. And then from 30 to 34, 8.5% of women and 11.6% of men. And then from age 35 to 30, which is the oldest ages they have, 5.1 and 6.5. So
35 to 40. So
yeah,
it's kind of
once people get over 40, the number of people getting marriages, getting divorced starts to decrease a little bit more. Now I don't mean they married over 40. They only got married at 20, but they made it to 40. And so I don't know if they're saying, well, we might as well just stick this thing out right now.
We've been together 15, 20 years.
It seems like I've been married 33 years. And, I'm happy happily married for 33 years. But I think also, when we think about sometimes, our living our lives, and, of course, we'll be at the end of our lives at some point. Do I want to, I don't want my wife to have to go through fulfilling my part when I'm gone.
Yeah.
I also don't want to live without her. Yeah. So it's like, if we get old and we're 70 years old, 80 years old, and flying our private plane and go or something like that. Then it would be convenient, but God has decided that. But I think that's when you're married as long as I am, I think, and you're happily married as long as I am, I think those are the kind of things you start thinking about. Is what if we have to be without each other? So it's a little bit different. Now here's some interesting, when you break those statistics down, is also America. It says there is one divorce approximately every 36 seconds, which amounts to 2,400 divorces per day, 16,800 divorces per week, 876,000 divorces per year.
Almost 1 million divorces every year.
And the average marriage ends in divorce in roughly 8 years. So
I thought after 5 years you kind of
all
right.
If you have 5 to 7 years of good communication and conflict resolution, then you usually have a solid union that will lead to lasting success. I think when you don't have communication, solid communication, and good conflict resolution, then you are not experiencing the union that marriage was intended to give. And so those two things are required because of our sinful flesh. And so that's the thing that we have to try to figure out our way around and figure out how to make that work well.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the church's role and why we have such a dilemma. There's a number of things that people have said about why the church is ill-effective. One of them is the church is ill-effective because it does not have what do you call it? It does not have the connection in the testimony that it used to have, because leaders tend to be getting divorced as much as and as quickly as people who are not leaders, because we have from deacons, you have pastors, you have lay leaders, you have counselors, you have a number of people who also contribute to the big dilemma that we have. And so therefore there's nothing or no one to really point to really focus on to really point to the dilemma and the issues that we face and everything else. And so the question is how do we get it to the point where we are actually having something to point young people to as it relates to marriage and divorce?
I think that I don't see how any marriage has made it without spiritual guidance. I think that.
I had a gentleman who I was working with, and we were talking about his Christian life, we were talking about all those different kinds of things, and here's what he told me. He said, he had been with his girlfriend for a long time, living together, had children, everything else. And so we started talking about marriage, and the question was, why marriage, why now? And he said, because one of his children got married. He said he didn't know this whole marriage thing was just not a thing. I mean, they knew people who were married, but they knew people who weren't married. It's like buying a car. Some people have a car, some people don't. Some people have apartments, some people have a house. Some people got married, some people didn't. Because he knew as many people living together, as many people got married. He knew leaders in the church, outside the church, who was married, divorced, and so they had baby daddies, baby mamas. You had preachers, you had 2-3 baby mamas. You had women preachers who had babies, and all their kids' last names were different. I mean, you know what I'm saying? The whole dynamic of the covenant was so washed away that until he came to the Lord and started hearing God's demand, he had no idea what all of this marriage stuff really meant.
Well, I mean, if you're not with the Lord, I mean, marriage means different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I wasn't saved, I mean, I thought marriage was, for my benefit, to satisfy me.
To make you happy.
To make me happy, it just wasn't any spiritual ramifications within it. So, of course, and I think a lot of people look at that. A lot of people look at marriage as half on the bills. You know what I'm saying? We're going to be married so we can get half on these bills. A lot of people get married because they got kids.
Do you think the half on the bills thing is kind of the result of being married to George for so long? George is the government, by the way.
Yeah, I know. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say because in my experience, I've dealt with in the past a lot of women who are always looking for that other half for the bills. I would say the women looking for other half of the bills. I mean, working women with kids who was going to work and then going to football games afterwards, who would just tell me, I just need a good man to help me with these bills and to teach my son how to be a man. You know
right, but with many of them, I'm wondering, and I'm guessing at this point, did they grow up in an environment where George was the father?
I mean, possibly.
And that way, George never took the kids to the, never did any kind of stuff. George just did this.
You know,
And so now I'm looking for someone who can be my George.
I
And
don't
for the
know.
listening audience, George.
But you know what I've noticed, thinking back, a lot of women, there are some real good women that have never relied on George. You know what I'm saying?
Was George their father?
Yeah, that's hard to tell. Why? Yeah.
You see, and the reason why I ask that question is because most statistics tell us that women will model
With a-
attributes of their father. Those are the attributes that they use to be able to search out and find a man. And so it would not be odd that a woman would automatically think, I'm going to have this baby so I can get him. Because that's the way you got George. And for the audience, George is the name that we've given the government under welfare. And let me tell you where that comes from. Is George is the provider of WIC. He's who is the funder to take care of your kids. He is the provider of welfare, feeds the family. He's the provider of Section 8, who gives shelter. And if those three things, which are the primary role of the man, are taking place, then the purpose of the man and the family it becomes decreased or either undervalued. And then if she's still with George when she marries him, then in reality, George is his father too. And she is in a dual relationship. And so you got to get George out of the house, even if it means a smaller house and a car that's not so cute. It's better to have your woman to yourself than to have George running.
Definitely.
And so you want to, and I'm not saying like go and just jump off the bridge right now. I'm saying what you need to do is it needs to
Work
be your
towards
goal.
it, yeah.
Hey, George can be gone here pretty soon.
But some women love George, and that's the bottom line.
And I think that woman should be married to George. In my mind, I think if now, I come from a different era and people say, but you've been married for 33 years, I get all that. Our attitude was, my woman ain't gonna be on me. She ain't gonna be being supported by the government. She's gonna be all this kind of stuff. And so, sometimes you take that woman out of the house where George was her dad, marry her into what you could afford, and then you guys work together to build towards whatever their parents might have.
Yeah.
But here's the deal: George will never give you as much as you can get for yourself.
Yeah.
All
George gives you
will do
enough
is-
just to get by.
Right? Yeah. I mean, because the poverty line, George gets you up to the poverty line, and the poverty line is not a salvageable way of living.
George is I thought George was only supposed to be here for 5 years. What happened with that? Or you had a drug test to date George. I mean, what happened?
I think a lot of that stuff didn't pass through the political to bees. I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
But there are two factors that come into mind. Is it easier? Well, there's three factors that come to mind. Is it easier to regulate that kind of stuff? Because some money's going somewhere. Right now, they're saying we don't mind y'all wasting money using drugs if George is out there. And so therefore, if you choose to use drugs, kill yourself, then go ahead and do it because it's cheaper for us when you do. Second thing is, we would have to pay to regulate all of that. So I got to have somebody who's now going out there doing a drug test. And I got to have drug testing available in every community, and I got to have all those different kinds of things that are going on. And though we would have less people abusing the money, we would also have another expense coming from the other side until it offsets. And then the third thing is what if all y'all got off welfare? I mean, we got departments and organizations and people got careers and all that kind of stuff that if y'all fix y'all problem,
then we
might be depending on George.
Yeah.
Right now, we ready for y'all to depend on George, and y'all pay, and we get paid to keep George in your house. So if you take George away,
wow,
then
wow, that's crazy.
George worked for them.
Yeah.
He's just the husband.
That's crazy. I never thought of it like that.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that the one of the largest disruptions in a successful marriage is George. Georgia determines a lot of stuff for a lot of us.
Yeah. Georgia's nice. From where, it depends on where you live at, though. Minnesota, Georgia's real nice. They let the family stay together.
Well, I mean, I think that with those things, but you also see another thing in Minnesota, like for example, their education rates are greater than ours. So you get the family staying together, you get a better situation take place. Here's the problem though. Georgia's funded by taxation. And so I would agree that letting the family stay together for a good period of time, but I would probably think the drug testing and benefit limits are reasonable.
Yeah. I mean,
and here's what I would probably do is I would take the extra money that we're not paying because you found out people were getting high and the limits, and I would say I'm gonna fund you. But here's the deal. If you're actively in college and can show me good grades, I will fund you and pay for your education.
You know what? And now that I think about it, that was a criteria. This when I was in college, and I had just had my son, and it was 4 of us, his mom and my son and his sister, and it was one thing that they was like, hey, you need help getting in. Show me proof you got a job, and then we're gonna get you into the apartment.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then show me that you on the birth certificate and all y'all in the same place, and then we're gonna give you this George packet. You know what I'm saying? For y'all to stay together.
Right.
But one thing was my transcripts was one of the criteria for all of it. I mean, George gave me clothes to go look for a job. You know what I'm saying? So I think there were more stipulations involved than just. Every month you're gonna get something on your debit card. And saying I think that those kinds of things, but I think the objective has to be like some of our objectives be like we're gonna end poverty. First of all, I think it's unrealistic. If you have a capitalist society, somebody's gonna be in poverty, or else you don't have capitalism anymore. If you have socialism, everybody's the same, and that means everybody's in poverty, in my opinion. Look at the history. Look at Russia. There's enough money in this joint with the rest with the 1% that everybody could be alright if it's social.
For how long?
That's the remaining to be seen.
Yeah, I can tell you. Right now, if you took all of the money from all of the billionaires and spread it around so that everybody was equal, we'd have 6-8 years, and then you would have all the equality would go away, or either everybody would be in poverty. You would have, because we've seen it happen. This is not like guesswork. This is history. We've seen every socialist society ended up.
Russia was socialist.
Yeah, it was a socialist society. It was communist. Socialist.
So is it still socialist or?
It's dictatorship now. But if you look at the common citizen, the common citizen has lived in. Have you seen tiny houses? Imagine a family of 4. It's those kind of things. So you had projects, government housing. The project was what I would term, not sure how it's documented, as a socialist experiment. So everybody in that.
It seems like socialist or communist, is gonna be negative.
Capital. I just believe, this is my personal belief, the capitalism, it makes it more dependent on the individual responsibility of the person. I know that's very Republican.
I agree, but it also gives that individual person, when they get to a certain power, they can abuse their influence to get more, and you know what I'm saying? I think there's more abuse of power when it comes. That's what's going on now.
No, define abuse of power now.
I mean,
let me say this: if in capitalism, let's suppose I work my farm harder than you, and then my farm grows 7 times more than you, and then you go into poverty and you can no longer afford your farm. So I say I will lease my farm to you to do work on, and I'm going to move out and buy me another farm. So now I got this farm working, you paying me rent. and your rent is paying for my new farm.
Okay. So
And so the money from this farm is
So
going to be
I
money
look
for
at that
another
differently.
farm.
But
Okay.
if you have a farm, we both have farms. Yours is growing a lot faster than mine.
Because I'm working harder than you. I'm talking about, and that's what
Oh, and
capitalism
that-
is.
Not all the time. Not
That's
all
what
the time.
that's what it always
I
is.
see a lot of taking advantage.
Well, that's not
You know what I'm
capitalism.
saying?
I'm saying what capitalism is what I just described. The person who works the harder has an opportunity to advance because the principle is hard work gives you work hard, play hard. Now, I would probably say what you're talking about is the misuse of capitalism, which is
What happens when we both working hard, but you just flourishing more, and then you have more resources and influence. So
Then
say, I'm
your
gonna put you out of business, and then now you and your family struggling, and I just got both farms next to each other because I didn't care about your situation.
then that's not capitalism. And that's where regulations come in to stipulate who can do what in capitalism, and that's where prejudice kind of kicked in and limited what certain groups can do and what certain groups couldn't do. So all of a sudden now you have, we have a capitalist environment, but what you did was what we did in America is we unleveled the playing field. But it doesn't mean the idea is good. That's like saying I ain't going to church no more because some of the preachers is wrong. You know what I'm saying? The idea is a good idea. In fact, to me, I think it's the best approach to economy that exists because it is the basic principle by which God uses. If you read Matthew chapter number 25, 19 following, I gave everybody something to start with, and then I didn't reward them based on their volume outcome. I rewarded them based on how they use what they had. So even the person who started off with 1 could have got the same reward as the person who started off with 5.
I got you.
Now,
I would say, I believe you. I'm macroeconomics.
the big problem here is in America. We always get back to this. Is when in the stimulation of capitalism, this concept of manifest destiny kind of became a governing ideology. Manifest destiny, for those who are not familiar with this, is a very simple explanation. It is a perception that we are the chosen people and we're supposed to win the West. And so therefore we justify ourselves taking over, slaughtering, doing all the things we were doing to everybody else by the same justification that Israel had to take over Canaanite. Okay, so that's manifest destiny. And so therefore with that ideology,
And most people in power have that manifest destiny.
well, manifest destiny was a thing that
Which is misuse.
Europeans, it was European, kind of the white Caucasian community came upon choosing themselves as that chosen group who was leaving out of, and I'm using a lot of terminology, leaving out of Egypt, so to speak, United Kingdom and some of the places where they didn't have freedom of religion, to go worship. And what they wanted to do when they came here, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, and they came here, and their objective was to take over as much of the land as possible because they felt like manifest destiny is the promised land. This was promised to us by God. So therefore, we can slaughter everybody, we can kill them, we can do whatever we want to do to them.
So that's misuse. That's a misuse in using your resources, like I said, for capitalism.
Well, but are you relating it too much to capitalism? I think that was a bad ideology that promoted this, a lot of the slave movement and a lot of the things that we see that took place because the policies were uneven. So don't get the two mixed up. Capitalism is an economic strategy. The manifest destination was a method through which there was justification for misuse of humanity, and it was a horrible misuse of God's intent in the Bible. It was what we do often is like sometimes we'll say we're the chosen Jews. You just pick somebody in the Bible who you want to be, and then you just apply those principles to you.
You know what? So, and I can see, and so speaking on this capitalism thing, I think it rolls downhill, and puts George in play to keep rich people rich and poor people poor.
And I think that George came into play
Through a capitalist idea.
through a socialist ideology.
No, because socialist ideology means that everybody has to have a room for George in the house.
Right, and that's
But
what
everybody
happens.
doesn't.
Is what they said is, in order to get them even with us,
Not
we're
like-
not. Well, let me finish. In order to get them even with us, we're not going to pay them for what we did to them. Well, what we will do is we'll develop a place where they can have what was called separate but equal.
Yeah.
And so you had the birth of all of these separate but equal avenues, and since they could not be equal economically, and we want to give them our money, let's take the tax money that we're collecting, and then let's utilize that to bring equality amongst them. I'll give you an example. Socialism is where everybody has an even keel. Now, with welfare, they have a formula where they try to give everybody an even keel. Socialism is about, like I give you an example. People who apply for Section 8 apply for some of those benefits. What is it like? I mean, it's humiliating. You're submitting yourself to people who feel like there's not service based in it, there's no competition, so therefore it's a monopoly. So when you serve them, it's like you get on their nerves.
Well, that depends on who you ask how it feels.
I mean,
A lot of people can feel relieved from it.
well, I've seen a lot of people who I just hate having to fill out this paperwork. I hate dealing with these people. I hate doing this stuff. I hate going down and like when people when we didn't have debit cards and you had to go face to face to get your food stamps.
Yeah.
People hated it. Hated it. I just want to get off of it. When we got in my days when we got commodity food, you hated going to the back of the truck. And somebody's sitting there with a table and justifying you, and then you go get your food. And they're looking down at you like,
Because you feel like a charity case.
you were a charity case. Because that's what socialism does. It's not what I earn. It is what collectively we've decided that I'm going to say this. Now, let me say this. The views and opinions that I'm offering here are not a reflection of the views and opinions of this station. So, but the way we manage fairness to dogs is a socialist approach. We come up with a standard on how all dogs should be treated.
I see you're very passionate about this.
Yeah, this is a big deal. It's a big deal. And the church, I think, has fallen into it. We're not building a capitalist. We're not building
this.
We're not building a Black Wall Street.
Speaking of the church,
Black Wall Street was
okay.
was-
Speaking of the church,
okay.
there is sort of a socialist ideology in the church when it comes to the widows or the women in the church when they don't have, the church gives.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's not a socialist environment, that is a capitalist environment. And it's in an environment where not only are you giving to them, but you're utilizing them for the benefit of the work of the ministry. And so therefore, if you look back in the day, widows, first of all, widows couldn't get jobs, so they couldn't contribute. So basically, all of our expenses was going to be on taking care of them when they fall or keeping them from falling. And so therefore, that's one thing. The second thing is they offered a value in the ministry.
So basically, the church gave them a job.
Basically, yeah. So I'll give you an example of a little experiment that we did some time ago. Basically, we took some girls who were teenage moms and said, we're going to put you guys in a small group. And then we said, we'll put you in a small group and we'll babysit your kids for free. But the caveat is you got to be in a small group. So when you're in this small group, we'll babysit. So we trained some elderly folks to babysit for those kids. They went through a training, they went through all this kind of stuff, so they babysit for the kids. But they were in Social Security, so they couldn't make more money. Social Security was poverty. So we gave them grocery vouchers. So you can spend your money the way you want to, because now we're paying for your groceries. And so now we're giving grocery vouchers to them. They're contributing wisdom, insight, and old school parenting into the kids. And young moms are being built to be better moms in the future. So that's kind of it's a capitalist ideology. It's like, it's not that I need to make you satisfied, I need to prepare you for growth. And that's the idea of capitalism. So if I give you welfare, I'm not giving you welfare because you don't have. I'm giving you welfare because of what you can get. So when you come to me, I don't want to know how poor you are. I want to know what opportunities you have. So where'd you leave off in school? What are your ambitions and where do you want to go? So when I put together a package, a support package for you, that support package is going to be on, okay, we're going to get 3 scholarships, we're going to do this. So I got my job to do, you got your job to do. But I want you to be learning to do your job without me so that at some point I will say bye-bye. And that's kind of the capitalist approach. And that's what the church should do. The church should not just be...
So you're saying George is not operating like that?
George does not operate that at all, yeah. George just says, you have another baby? There's another extra $50 a month. Whatever it costs. And so yeah, I think we totally lose the intent of help and support and what the scripture talks about. And I think that the more you build from that, then the more you will have people who understand the concept. If all of the wealthy people come from the wealthy people, you divide the country. But if some of the wealthy people come from the poor people, then you constantly have a sustainable engine. You know, like one of the things we do in Freedom Schools, we give people who are in college an opportunity to come back and work with little scholars. And as they work with young scholars, working with them young scholars gives them a picture and an opportunity to understand the value of reinvestment. And so the majority of them, as much as we have tracked, who spend a couple of years in Freedom Schools serving young kids while they're in college, will give back to their community either by finding jobs in there when they graduate, or either be a major contributor or a major volunteer person into the communities that they serve. They get the picture. That's what happens often in the church with missionaries. A missionary is a kid that went over to Jamaica when he was little, and you serve the people, you did that, you come back, and then later you be like, I want to equip myself so that I can get to Jamaica.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
So we have to talk more about socialism capitalism.
Okay.
Socialism
all
capitalism.
right. Today or overtime?
Overtime.
Okay.
We got it.
We'll come in here with a good, solid definition of what they both mean.
Yeah.
And then kind of go from there, And it's, unfortunately, I think they both dip in each other's, cereal. So you can't be a total capitalist. You can't be a capitalist without having some socialist ideology, because both of them are dealing with the same thing. Like economics deals with everybody's money. And then also, you got to have, there are some elements in it that distinguish one from the other. And I think you'll find that people who utilize capitalism in the manifest destiny way are not biblical in their approach at all. People who utilize socialism as a method of survival are not biblical at all. And so God's in the middle.
Yeah. I hear you.
So the issue becomes now that we have deviated from this unit, this covenantal unit, who is supposed to be creating things. And so God said, let us make man. And so the created activity took place in the covenant that they have in their relational covenant, Trinitarian union. That's why it says let us. So when he formed us, he described us as creators. He says, talks about you should help me. And so therefore you had a purpose, a created purpose to be creator, and you're creating things that you would have dominion over on behalf of God. So in your marriage, your responsibility is one of dominion, and that means that on behalf of God, you are governing something so that people can see who God is. Part of the responsibility in doing that is, and the first principle of union is how we treat each other and by what standard we use to govern our treatment. And so how I treat my wife is not based on my standard, or it would be subject to my limits.
Yeah.
So it has to be based on the covenantal standard.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. If you're making an agreement with Ford that you're going to pay monthly payments for your car, you have to treat the car right. And you got to treat the car based on what you agree with Ford. And so your agreement is with Ford about that car. If the car stopped running, you can't say, well, I ain't paying. No. You can't say, well, I ain't keeping insurance. No. Well, if part of your agreement, I'm going to keep it in the garage. I ain't keeping it in the garage no more. No. You can't do that because all of that agreement is with Ford Finance.
First off, I would never go to good Ford.
Okay, well, what would you get?
Chevy.
So you're dealing with the Chevy deal.
I know.
So the Chevy dealer says,
And they make me keep insurance on both of my
Right.
cars.
and sometimes they'll say, are you parking in the garage? We'll give you a discount for that. Do you have no loan? We'll give you a discount for that. They give you all those different kinds of things, and they give you those discounts, and that's part of your contractual agreement.
Yeah.
And you can't say because it ain't running right, I ain't gonna pay my dues.
Yeah.
So I gotta treat my wife the right way, regardless to what my feelings is and what my thoughts are.
You're tuning into the Tipping Point. Chev-Dev Pastor Archie talking. Our conversation starts somewhere, but we go so deep and down the lines. We started on divorce and talked about George, and went and talked about the ideology and the predecessory thoughts behind George. Now we're back on marriage, and I can appreciate that because a lot of people, I would just say me, I don't really, when I listen to something or I'm learning about something, I gotta go to the foundation of it to get a full understanding of something.
Which makes a lot of sense. And I would say to those who are listening to us, when we talk about George, I'm going to keep reminding you that just tuned in. When we talk about George, we're talking about the government. We have named the government George, particularly 3 programs of the government. And that is Section 8,
TANF, and WIC.
yeah.
That's part of TANF.
Well, WIC, and then food stamps.
Food stamps.
So if it's feeding your family,
Yeah.
and if it is taking care of your kids, and if it is providing shelter,
Yeah.
then George is the
Now, but we also want to say that we think George can be necessary only for a time. Would you agree on that?
Well, I would say George is as necessary as I am. Because the George kicks in because of the fatherlessness. Okay. So right now, my kids have me and my wife as their parents. So when they fall short, George should have to kick in. I'm gonna kick in first. And I'm gonna coach them through and I'm gonna work with them. And here's the reason why. Is because I'm gonna take a biblical stand. You're not gonna get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
You're gonna get enough space to get by. So that you're
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think
George,
for the situations where that's not there, George is okay
Right,
to
yeah.
get you to another point.
That's-
There never should be a living or a comfortability.
right. That is the principle where we talked about capitalism. I mean socialism versus capitalism. There's a capitalist ideology. Is that once I get you on your feet, you start contributing to the value.
Don't inherit the socialist idea, which is this is a way of life.
This is the way, yeah. Like to me, and the views and opinions that I'm about to express are not necessarily views and opinions of the station. I think it's ridiculous to think about McDonald's as a career. I mean, not managing and owning, but I'm talking about cooking burgers and cleaning up trash. To me, if people say, "Well, I can't live off of this," well, that tells me 2 things. First of all, you probably had kids before you were ready. Because as a single dude, a single woman, probably good. Secondly, and I don't mean live off of it comfortably, I mean you could be in it while you're going to school and making an advance of yourself. So what has happened is you've been catapulted into adulthood by making the decisions and having a lifestyle that negatively affected you over a period of time. Now, I'm not saying I love y'all. I'm just saying that's just, we got to calculate
more
what it is.
aspirations
Right.
than
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'm just saying that if you have a kid at 16, 17, 18,
You're forced
and
to
then
do
all of a
that.
sudden say, well, you need to pay me more because I have more responsibility. I'm thinking, you kind of made that decision on your own. I mean, unless you got raped, and so I would say that's part of the challenge. The second part is, I think, like young people who used to do like for me, all I needed was a lawnmower. I could make $200 a week. And so some of those kinds of things, I think, those opportunities, I think we need to give those opportunities. When I have a little kid comes around and he's shoveling snow, I mean, I got a snow blower. But if you come through shoveling snow, I'm gonna kick you out. And if what you asked me for is way less than what I think you should get, I'm gonna give you more. Because I want you to be totally encouraged about that entrepreneurial drive. One of the things I admire most a lot about your family is y'all boys are the most entrepreneurially driven folks in the same family that I can think about. All of y'all are talking about. Nobody settles for I just get a paycheck. And so I think that's a big deal. So in the family, those elements that are part of a biblical model of not only the church connection, but a biblical model of the family itself are critical in keeping the divorce rate. That's why I said that when we start talking about divorce, you got to talk about marriage, because the Bible divorce is not an issue. It's a description of a dysfunction or failed attempt to fulfill the covenant. Right, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you recognizing that about our family, Pastor. We try to keep going, but I think it's only going to be as successful as we are grounded, in good teaching, what I'm saying? Because, I've tried many of things and failed, many of things. So when it came time to ask money for this, everybody was like, yeah, my brother's we done tried about 11 things with you, Dad, you know what I'm saying? So, praise God. But I think also, if I was going to have this endeavor and then play some other type of music, I don't think it would happen. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely believe it was for the kingdom agenda.
And I think that the route to get here kind of prepares you for the ups and downs of being here, because I think most folks, now, I became a social entrepreneur, so I started doing more not-for-profits than for-profit. And I still kind of have a passion for my community, so therefore I do a lot of things that are not based on profit. And I don't regret that at all. In fact, and it's kind of one of the joys of my life is to see young people that were affected by our work some years ago. I see families that have grown up to be, successful people who have done great entrepreneurial things, moved on, those kind of things. And so there's a great joy in that. But there were some failures along the way that I can go back and say, and sometimes I look back and look at the failures and say, well, what was I even thinking at the time? But in our world, other than selling drugs, there wasn't pictures of entrepreneurs. Now, you might have a guy who owned a candy liquor store
or a tire shop.
Those kind of things. But what happened is, the Chinese food people came in, and they are entrepreneurially driven and started doing our feet and pedicures and hands and fingernails.
I think entrepreneurship might be an answer to George. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think you can't. That's what capitalism promotes. Figure out something of value that you can bring to a particular community, and then based on that value.
But the last time our community struck out against George burned us down.
Well, that was the manifestation of ideology. But the problem is they burned and bombed, and he's talking about Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for those who are listening. They burned and bombed out the entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. So you don't have a lot of kunta kintes that say, cut my leg off if you will, but I have made up my mind that I'm going to run and do my own thing. Yeah. And I think you gotta be willing to limp, to be poor enough, struggle enough to be able to pull it off. But I think our biggest problem is we take on the responsibility of family way too early. Yeah. Like you shouldn't have 3 kids by 10 or 20. Yeah. And you're not even married yet. So your kids got 3 last names. And I say to those who are already in that predicament, yes, there is a way out, and you can be successful right where you are.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that, if I buy all my stuff while I'm in Arkansas and I'm going to come to Kansas City, then I just need a bigger car because I got to carry a lot more stuff. But if I wait until I get to Kansas City to buy my stuff here, then the travel is going to be a lot easier. So I would say the same thing. You can be successful, but you got to remember you got a whole lot more baggage than someone who started having kids after they got their feet at least level. I don't mean that you're successful, I mean level.
Level.
Yeah.
I understand. I trust me. I never really been have a socialist ideology when it came to George, because we all been. I think. Well, I can't say we all. I've been on George. You know what I'm saying, a lot, but it's never a lifestyle. It's always a stepping stone.
And I think that's what it's for.
Yeah.
I think that if all of us had that ideology that George is a stepping stone, number one, I think the bureaucracy would be lighter. Like, for example, if everybody said, man, I ain't gonna be on this program for this long, then you have this goal of getting there. And it would be great if it wasn't forced. So if the government had to pick you up, that means you ain't learning what you're on. But you have to have a passionate desire to say, I'm getting off of this. I'm gonna do this for 4 years and then be done. And then you start working toward that goal, and the family's working towards that goal. Then once you become a taxpayer, your attitude about supporting other people is gonna be, okay, dude, how long you plan on being doing this? You know, I mean, and then you can say to another dude, no, I used to be there. You can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? You have all those elements that are good. And part of the problem is centralization of George. Like, we used to go to 34th Street and get the commodity truck on Truth. And the commodity trucks showed up in the different communities. And then you would go to the place in your community. It was a community activity that was very, very centralized, decentralized. Now, so that means now everybody who's in that community would be part of the accountability system to say, dude, have you been on this for 5 years?
So let me ask you this, because when I think of George in general, the government in general, I think of, oppression. But George don't discriminate, because there's more poor white folks taking advantage than poor black folks.
Right, and I would probably say, I would say that's definitely true. More white people have needs and are in poverty than black people.
Would you just say because it's more white people?
I don't know the statistic enough to say that it's per capita, but I would probably say that I know some great models of black, white, and Hispanic people who saw that system as a stepping stone and who have done extremely well in utilizing it for its proper purpose. I would like to say that most of my conversations amongst my people, and I don't mean my Christian family, I mean my racial family, have been how they can get over it, not how they can get up. And so I try to encourage, no, here's the deal. If you scam the system and it benefits you, how many other people will need it and it won't be there for them? Because I think that's kind of what we run into often. If you have people who scam the system, like, if I go in and, like, you get a job, you work it, whatever, and I come into your job and want the hookup. And so now, here's what happens is the profits from that company lose money. And guess who gets laid off? He gets laid off. So now you and me both are poor. I just dress better than you now, except for the stuff that you stole. And so, you know what I'm saying, to go in and say, well, here's the business in the community that's hiring black people. So I want to make sure I not only support the community,
but I don't want to
but I want to make sure you become a good employee, because here's the deal. How you do determines whether my kids can get hired. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the way you got to be thinking. Like when I go to Burger King in the hood, I walk up to the window, Burger King, and I say, I want a number 6. A what? A number 6? So you want the burrito? Yeah. I want a number 6. All right, what's your drink? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that kind of stuff is...